A plate of steaming vegetables, 4 candles. Sailors soon learn to take great pleasure in simple comforts. And in the morning, woken by the sound of an old bloke making a good fist of rowing a nice dinghy across the incoming tide. We'd just spent the night tied up to a 300-year-old stone jetty and woken up to make breakfast while watching the sea repossess what, during the night, had been land. You would have to be a rich man to be able to afford a holiday home with an outlook as harmonious as this. But Katie is afloat and is now a live thing and ready to be away while there's water over the Findhorn bar. It was a 14-mile reach diagonally across the Moray from Findhorn to Cromarty. Something often seems to happen in a sailor's head when observing the glory that is sailing physics. I love the dynamic curve of a nicely made sail. I will look at it and try to comprehend the beauty with which it caresses and cajoles the energy of the wind to forfeit a little of itself as it passes by. A wake or a gracefully undulating lazy-jack will hold my gaze for minutes on end while my brain absorbs the rhythm of the boat. Solo time on a tiny yacht is almost infinitely flexible. It stretches and shrinks. Without a watch, I could not really have told you if the 14 miles had taken 14 hours or 40 minutes. Katie, with the help of nothing more than a bungee holding the tiller central, sailed herself nearly all the way. The entrance to the Cromarty is almost literally guarded by 2 sets of rocks called the Suitors. Apparently they look like a pair of shoemakers sitting back to back, bent over their lasts. If you say so, lads. They are the location of the most intense, geologically challenging quarter of a mile of the journey so far. There's so much going on. Small wonder that Scotland's best ever geologist was born here. Godly-minded son of a drowned seaman, Hugh Miller became a stonemason and fossil hound, and then an esteemed academic geologist, then a confused but rather good poet, who went slightly bonkers trying to reconcile geology with theology. The Cromarty is big enough to hide a navy and was a closely guarded military harbour through both world wars. So the Suitors are studded with gun emplacements and observation posts. But long before the Firth fully opens out, the rigs, which have been part of the Cromarty skyline for 40 years or more, start to loom. Their full scale doesn't reveal itself until the inrushing tide has swept us swiftly past the centuries-old and slowly dying tiny harbour that was once an indispensable lifeline for the village of Cromarty. The Firth is 19 miles long and a mile or so wide. The first bit is seldom less than 20 metres deep, making it an ideal place to park big things that float. I chose a quiet Sunday morning for my sail up the Cromarty because during the week the place is humming with workboats that whiz back and forth preparing the monsters for service or standby or decommissioning. With working men around I would have had to stay clear. But today I can sail almost as close as I like. They used to say that the Cromarty is a giant barometer for the state of the world economy. When it's full of rigs, then oil demand is low, and when the economy booms and the price of oil goes up, then the Cromarty is all but empty. But times change, and in the age of solar panels and wind farms, counting rigs isn't quite as reliable as it once was. Imagine though if you could bring one of those visionary Victorian engineers who worked on the Forth Bridge up here and show him the works of 20th century man. They'd be certainly astonished, but also, I think, hard-pressed to guess what these ungainly monsters are for and why such things need to be so big. Then, much to my surprise, before the rigs had really fallen behind, I found myself in a mooring field for small yachts, with a fleet of sonatas, which made me reminisce a little. My perfect reach of that morning had turned into a beat, but there was still a healthy tide underneath us to drive us deep into the Scottish heartland towards Dingwall. Soon after Invergordon, the Firth settles down to become a classically gentle east coast loch with slowly sloping fertile pastures and patches of lush deciduous woodland that come almost to the shoreline. When you come close in, it's the land birds that own the acoustic. Katie, with her big baggy mainsail and modestly short jib, will never be close-winded in the way of the sonatas I once campaigned, but she gets herself into the slot and gives a passable imitation of an upwind-capable boat. She tacks with alacrity through the wind and she starts to eke the remaining 5 or 6 miles to the bridge. .9 metres. There's a nice wind coming from the west, but it's a clear day, which is great. This is the best weather in the country, best sunshine in the country. It's 19 degrees down south. My guess is this is 10, something like that. So Cromarty Firth as far as the bridge. I don't know whether I'm going to go under it or not. But it is an awfully long way away. Sailor gave me this book. Fantastic. I like there's an image here of a bloke who's got his head in his hands looking down at the engine. But here it says about Cromarty Firth. Fantastic. As far back as the 15th century, the Cromarty Firth was noted by Alexander Lindsay, pilot to King James IV, as above all havens in the Isle of Britain for safety of shippies, both great and small, is the Firth of Cromarty. For all kind of wind, this and stormy, in which haven shippies may enter at any time of flood. Brilliant. Has got a low bridge on it though. The tide was high and about to turn when I got close to the bridge, and it did look rather low, so I chickened out of going all the way to Dingwall. Maybe next time. And then the wind gods decided to punish my craven indolence. they withdrew their support from the project. At afternoon, I was taunted with the odd fickle zephyr or two. I diligently paddled towards them, only to have them vaporise as soon as I arrived. But it was a wonderfully lazy afternoon while I slowly prepared supper while drifting with the ebb, until night fell. So I dropped the hook and watched as the Cromarty lit up like it was Christmas. I was heading back south and east towards Nairn, my choice for a base for the last weeks in Scotland. I'll spare you the flat, calm motoring, the 14 miles back across the Moray. Time did some serious stretching, not in a good way. Nairn Harbour is tidal, but I couldn't have chosen a better place because while waiting for the tide there's a delicious sandy inlet to explore.
Got a pretty good channel, you can see that I'm just being swept along about 2.3 metres here.
To come straight from the hard rocks, gun emplacements and audacious oil rigs of the Cromarty to the gracious curves and gentle textures of the southern shoreline makes it all the more wonderful. Katie's 13-inch draft means that I seldom need to tow a dinghy. The keels are well back under her belly, so a gently sloping shingle shore is an ideal place to step straight from bow to dry land. But I would rather sail or drift than walk. Strolling in a place like this is for those who are not enlightened enough to own a boat. Eventually the birds take to the air, a sure sign that the tide is about to turn underneath me. If I'm not to spend the night aground in this delightful spot, not an entirely bad idea, then it's time to turn and run back down the GPS I'd prudently laid while coming in. The bars and bays of the south shore of the Moray are a mecca for shallow sailors, timorous kayakers and now paddleboarders. The Moray sandbars have been created by the occasional northeaster that comes thundering in to rearrange the geography, creating new art with the power of its blast, only to smash it all down again the next time this coast gets a pasting. There's a real beauty in the way that every rock, pebble and grain of sand has been graded and sorted and piled into elegant curves. Nairn is another harbour that Telford had a hand in. It was started by an engineer who made a bit of a Horlicks of the place, and Telford was called in to turn around a failing project, resulting in one of his better efforts, apparently. The marina, because of the drying entrance, is as cheap as chips and twice as nice. It was lovely to return to the faintly wafting whiff of fast food and the chattering sound of Scottish holiday makers disporting themselves on these truly fabulous beaches that they all but take for granted. Nairn has been called the Torquay of Scotland, but it was about to give me the most intensely Scottish day of my life. And that'll be in the next film. Assuming this one gets enough taps.